Hi everybody, this is Jason Diamond from Developmentor, and today we're going to talk about client-side templates. I'm hoping you all can hear me. I should be getting a chat pretty soon, and I did. Sounds good. Awesome, thanks Mary. So our topic for today is client-side templates. If you haven't come to one of our classes before, you haven't met me, here's develop.com, our website. Scroll down a bit and there's me, and we're talking about modifying our DOM with client-side templates. So let's see what that's all about. I'm going to do our normal developmental style where we talk about the high-level concepts, and then we start to display those concepts working in actual code that we type in live. Just so that you can see all the mistakes that we make and see how we get around them, just get a feel for what it's like to use these technologies. So we'll just get ourselves familiar with the concept of client-side templates, and maybe you're already using them. If so, that's cool. If not, maybe this will give you a new tool for your toolbox. But this is more about just sharing the experience and just knowing what's possible. So client-side templating might sound a little bit on the odd side. What we basically mean is we want to generate content, or we want to generate HTML, usually. For the most part, we generate our HTML on the server. So think about a web forms or an MVC site where a request comes in from the browser. Actually, the next slide shows this request. Going into the browser, hits the server, and a lot of code is happening here on the server in terms of dynamically compiling the form or the view and then evaluating it, or I guess instantiating and invoking its methods. But the end result of that is always a rather large string of HTML. And that HTML makes its way down across the internet to our browser, where the browser then renders that, and we see the pixels on the screen that make a website look the way it does. And all we're talking about doing is moving where that's done, where we generate our HTML over here to down here. And there's reasons for doing that. It's not just because, which it seems like that is often the case, that developers just want to do something new and different. But there's some good reasons to generate content on the client. But in order to do that, we're going to have to change our strategy a little bit. Instead of generating HTML in this machine, we're going to generate down here. In order to generate HTML down here, we need to have the data that's used to generate the HTML, which usually these days involves JSON, JavaScript object notation. And so somehow we're going to have to get that. It doesn't have to be JSON, it could be XML, it could be whatever format it is that you're interested in or prefer to use. But the main thing is that the actual HTML, this stuff right here, is going to get generated down here and then displayed internally inside the browser. So why might we do that? Let me go back to the previous slide. Typically, our browser receives a static HTML, and I quoted static just to indicate that we think of our websites as being dynamic, but as far as the browser is concerned, it's just a big file that contains a bunch of markup in it, and he renders that. Right? He didn't see the actual construction of the HTML. So we then use JavaScript to add the interactivity and the rich behaviors, and just really to improve the experience that they get there on the client. And nowadays, a lot of that experience involves new content appearing in the page. It's not just simple stuff like image rollovers and making buttons look fancy when you mouse over them. So we're actually receiving data from the client, from the server, whether we're pulling via AJAX or it's being pushed to us with WebSockets or server-sent events or one of the other AJAX-like technologies that are starting to get popular now. So these are normal web apps where this happens. Think Facebook or Twitter, where you're staring at your Twitter homepage and reading your tweets, and then a message pops up that says, hey, we've got 5 new tweets for you. Click here and load them now. So that's content that somehow came from the server down to the client, and it was ready and queued, waiting for us to look at it, to generate the HTML so we can actually see it. Another popular option these days are single-page applications. I'm not trying to cross that out. Single-page applications, or SPAs or SPAs, however you pronounce it. The idea is that you have one HTML file that contains an awful lot of JavaScript, and the browser opens that one file and stays there forever. to the user, they feel like they're navigating from page to page as they click around. But that's just because there's an awful lot of JavaScript that is changing what's visible. Why would you write one of these? Well, some people use it just for an excuse to do something different. Twitter tried this and it didn't turn out so good for them. So they switched back to server-side rendering with enhancing it on the client like we're talking about. But there are some good reasons to use single-page apps. For example, if you want to be an app that goes offline or is installed on a phone, HTML5 has the application cache, which we had a webinar at Development Tour, I don't know, a year or so ago. You can see it if you're interested. Resources, webcasts, you can probably find it there. But we can install or write applications in HTML and JavaScript and then wrap them in a PhoneGap shell and then put that on the App Store, the Play Store, and people can then install those and give you money. But these things are mostly static HTML with a lot of JavaScript. So I'm not going to really focus on writing a single-page application. That's a huge topic. But the techniques that we'll see here in terms of having an HTML template and then injecting some data into it is commonly used in these single-page apps. So we'll be able to leverage that and use it if we find ourselves in a project that's writing one. So we saw this, and let's talk about how we can generate content. I've already made the assumption that templates are the way to go. My audio connection is not working. It keeps timing out. I'm sorry. If that's the case for everybody, then we might be able to blame me. But it might be that your network is bad. If it stays bad, maybe you can keep chatting, and maybe Mary could point something out that we could try. What do we got? We can hear you. Okay, so Jim and Asim. Okay, I'm sorry, Brad. It must be your network. Thanks, guys, for the comments. So I've already made the assumption that templates are the way to go, and I don't mean that as a fiat where I'm just going to dictate that this is the best way, because they're not always the best way. There's some really interesting technologies like Knockout or Angular that can do some dynamic data binding, MVVM, WPF, and Silverlight style applications, and those are really cool. I love Knockout. I like it a lot, but I often use it in conjunction with libraries like what we're about to look at. The ones I'm going to look at are Mustache and Handlebars. So these seem to be the two most popular template engines in the JavaScript world right now. And I'm focusing specifically on the JavaScript world because that's where our pages run, right, on our clients, and JavaScript's the only language that works on all the browsers that our users are using. So we're going to have to find somehow some sort of template engine. We don't need to use a template engine, of course, because we probably are already using jQuery. If so, it's pretty easy to generate new content on the fly. But if you've seen how easy that is and started doing it, you've seen also how difficult it can be to I guess writing is easy, but reading it after the fact is hard. It's kind of like Perl. jQuery reminds me a lot of Perl because of all the punctuation, but they consider it a write-only language. But template engines are going to make it easy to do and also easy to maintain because it's going to look like normal HTML. So let's create a sample application, and you can probably tell that I'm on a Macintosh right now. I will switch over if we have time to a Windows VM, and I can show how this works in the exact same way in an MVC project. And everything that we are going to see is going to work there because we're talking about JavaScript, right? We're not talking about anything related to ASP.NET or MVC or any other server-side technology. And with NuGet, it's actually really easy to install these template engines into your MVC app. But for now, just to keep all that stuff out of the way, we got a simple console open up, and I've already downloaded a couple of files. These are the files that you probably would have in your project. I've got jQuery. I've got the template engine called Mustache, which I'll show its website for in a second. I've got the template engine called Handlebars. which I'll show its website as well. And so that our HTML looks somewhat presentable, I'm going to use Bootstrap. But there's nothing pre-written here that didn't come from an existing open source project. So plain text editor, Sublime Text, and we'll just add a new index.html file to it. Everything I'm going to do right now is going to be inside a static HTML file, but remember this concept of how web apps work is, as far as the browser is concerned, the HTML that he got is static. Right? The server may have done an awful lot of work to generate that static HTML, but really on this land, it's not changing. Right? That's just not the way web apps work. So let's add a simple HTML doc, and we'll do the normal head and body and not spend too much time making this look good. If we want to be HTML5, I should use a snippet for this. And we'll throw our doc type in, but this will be our client-side template example. And let's bring the CSS in so things look somewhat good. I'm using Bootstrap 3, which just came out yesterday, which is pretty nice. Did I get the right file name? Bootstrap theme, yeah. So we'll have a webinar. We're doing another webinar on Thursday in 2 days about Bootstrap. And since Bootstrap 3 just came out, I'll be talking about 3. But I've been using it for over a month now from their Git repository. So let's, I guess, add a header, client-side templates, just so we can see what the example. And let's do the example that I mentioned, Twitter. So you're on twitter.com and you're reading your tweets, and then a new tweet comes in. Depending on how many people you follow, that might happen a lot. And there's a little thing that appears at the top of your list of tweets that says, hey, we've got new tweets. Click here to read them. So we'll replicate that with I guess we'll do a Bootstrap list group. This is new in Bootstrap 3 if you haven't seen it yet. But each one of the list group item, each one of the items inside a list group will have some sort of link to more details about the item, but we'll probably also have an H4 in here. Bootstrap 3, list groups are new. So let's go look at the Bootstrap docs really, really fast. Because I forgot the class name, and I haven't made snippets for Bootstrap 3 yet. So with custom content, I've got H4 and a P. Okay, cool. So we're going to stick everything inside our A, and we're going to put a title inside here, and class equals list group item header, I believe, heading. And here's our news item. And I think we had a P here with a class of list group item text. We'll check that really fast. List group item text. Okay, cool. And we'll just stick some text inside it, so we have something to see. So this is static HTML. Duplicate a few of them. Open this in my browser, and we'll keep our dev tools open so that if there's any errors, we'll see them here in the console. That happens with JavaScript at times. I see that I forgot to put some padding around here, so we'll just tighten it up a bit. I guess loosen it up. Div container, and move all the stuff we just generated, which we're assuming that we downloaded from the client. So if we're emulating twitter.com, this is a static HTML that was rendered on the server, and we just received this. And okay, now we have some nice padding on the body. And the idea is that new news items are going to come in and appear, I guess, at the top of this list. So in order to make that happen, we're going to need some JavaScript. Because remember, this came from the server, and it's not going to change. So let's add some JavaScript to the page. We typically put our JavaScript in the page at the bottom of the body tag, or right before the end tag for the body element. And script source, I'm going to use jQuery because it makes things easier. And I don't think I'm going to use the Bootstrap CSS, but might as well include it since it's here. And I'm also going to need our own file, so script.js of some sort. So we're going to put our code in there to keep it out of the HTML. So right-click our project and script.js. In here, I will add a closure so I have scope, no pollute the global namespace. And this is where we're going to get our new item from the server somehow. Get new item. So our item is the thing that appears inside that list group, that list of tweets or news updates. So I'm just made up a JavaScript function. We will implement it. And we'll pretend here, so you're going to have to use your imagination, that we are doing some sort of AJAX call, or we dequeuing this from some data that came in from, a WebSocket connection. We'll just imagine, so we can keep things simple. But we'll return a simple object. And I imagine a news item would have something along the lines of a title, news update, and some sort of description. And we'll stick some filler text in there. In real life, they're probably going to have dates, links to more content, etc. So you can imagine this can get more and more complicated, but mechanically it's all the same. These are just normal properties on a JavaScript object, which we could have retrieved via AJAX and received as a JSON object, or XML if you prefer. It doesn't matter. As long as we somehow get it into a JavaScript object and return that from our function here, we can use it to supply to our template. So with traditional jQuery, we probably do something like look at our HTML and go, okay, I see that every single one of these items is an A tag, and every one of those has an H4 with a title and a P with the description. But there's obviously some classes here which Bootstrap is requiring me to include. And whether you're using Bootstrap or not, you're going to be doing the same thing. I can't imagine you working on a website now that's not going to have classes, or don't do this, but even style attributes, or worse, just inline style stuff here inside your HTML. You need to change how it looks somehow. Class attributes are probably the best way to do that. So it complicates things enough to where we don't want to just use jQuery to manually construct elements and then add classes to them, because that would be tedious and difficult to maintain. And imagine what happens when your designer comes up with some sort of new theme and says, oh, I want to change how this works. Can you please stop using an A tag and start using a div instead? If it's just plain HTML, the designer can do that. If it's JavaScript, he's probably going to screw it up. Even when that designer is you, if you're the one who's trying to change the way your dynamic content looks, it's very error prone when you have content embedded inside code. So let's not do that. Let's instead get a template somehow, and let's go and grab our item template from some source. The idea behind templates is that you have some sort of string that represents the content that you want to produce, but it has holes in it. So we can think of it a little bit like this. I just added, let's make it a little bit bigger, an HTML string here inside my code, and I put this little interesting snippet, open curly title, close curly. This variable placeholder for, I'm assuming most of us are .NET developers, so we've probably done this in the past. Less than %equals if we did classic ASP, or if we use the ASP Web Forms View Engine in MVC. Nowadays in Razor we do this kind of thing with the @sign. But Razor is a template engine. It just got a different syntax. The template engine that we're using uses these curly braces, 2 curly braces, to render an expression. So it's got holes inside the content, or the markup that we want to use to generate our dynamic content. Now these curly braces are usually pronounced as stash. Let me spell that out. So it's not stash like I'm going to stash this away, but stash, which is short for mustache. So if you say somebody's got a really nice stash, you're complimenting their mustache. And so you'd read the stash dash title and then close stash dash, I guess. And we call these stashes or mustaches because the template engine that we're using is called Mustache. And they name themselves after the fact that if you take one of these curly braces and turn it sideways 90 degrees, kind of like a smiley or an emoticon, it looks like a mustache. And the mustache template syntax was, I think, invented in the Ruby world. You can tell which links I've been to on this site. The JavaScript version and the .NET version. I've also been to the documentation. But there's tons of different platforms which support mustache templates. And probably including one of yours. I don't see a platform here that's not mainstream right now. There's even some that aren't mainstream at all. But you can probably find what you're looking for here. The JavaScript version is a simple GitHub project, which is just mustache.js, which is what I'm using. I've already got that downloaded. I showed that right here. So I don't have to download it from GitHub. If we were doing an MVC or some sort of .NET application, we would just use NuGet, and we'd get the latest version of Mustache really easily. But what I'm going to do, since I'm just doing plain JavaScript, is I'm going to include the mustache.js file into the page, and because I'm going to use it inside script.js, I am going to ensure that I include it before script.js. If you use something fancier than normal script includes, like require.js, I can't remember if Mustache supports AMD modules. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay. But I have used it inside an app that used require.js, so I probably shimmed it if I needed to. If I didn't, then it just worked. Mustache has no dependencies on jQuery or Bootstrap or otherwise, so we can totally move this up above and it wouldn't change anything. Likewise for handlebars, the other template engine we're going to look at. So we now have this included in the page, and back to script.js, I can use it. So I've got my source here for my template. I don't like it being here, and I'm going to get rid of it soon, but before we do that, let's compiled template, the source that we have, and we use Mustache's compile method. And the return value of the compile method is a function. So I can invoke it like any normal JavaScript function and pass in the data that I'm going to use to fill in the holes in that template. Now, because the object that I have right here, new item, which we got from get new item, he returns an object that has a title property, we're going to see news update get added right here inside this H4. Soon as I refresh. Oh, but something went awry. Nice thing about, oh, maybe it worked perfectly, but we can't tell because we never add it to the DOM. So nice thing about doing live demos is that I often make mistakes, and my hope is, yeah, I'm a little embarrassed when silly stuff like this happens, but my actual hope is that you learn from them. And this is the one that I keep repeating. I generated the content, I assume, but I didn't do anything with it. So here's our actual new content. We return this from our compiled template function. Now this is just a string of HTML. So if we want to do some baby steps and see what this looks like, we'll just alert it for now, and oh cool, it seems like it worked. We can see news update inside the H4. But I've got this string of HTML. What do I do with it? Let's wrap it inside a jQuery object, and that's going to turn it into DOM elements. So it does all the parsing stuff for us, very easy. And we append it to, or I guess we want to prepend it to our list, which I don't think I gave an ID. So here's our list group, and we'll stick news as his item, or as his ID. So prepend this new content, that new A tag with whatever he has inside him, to the element with the ID of news. And prepend just means go to the front. So newest first. And there's our news update. It looks different, but that's because I don't have the correct class names on it. So I'm going to have to fix that. And I can keep typing in my code right here, but no way am I, do I do it in this style. Instead, I get the source for my templates, get template source from an easier to edit place. Let's make a new function. Whoops. Function get template source. Is that what I called it? Get template source. Okay. Normally, it's I shouldn't say normally, but it's very frequently the case where you have more than one template on a page. And to do that, to distinguish which template you want, we're going to pass in an ID of some sort, like item-template or whatever. So we're going to get an ID, and we're going to do something to return the HTML with the holes inside it. Oh, I deleted my old source. But the HTML that has those // placeholders, and return that string. And the common way to do that with these Mustache or these all client-side templates is to add a script element to your HTML. This isn't the only way to do it. You can dynamically download templates via Ajax, and I've done that with good success. You can also include them into your pages if you do a little bit of pre-compilation, and that works very well too. I'll talk about that when we get to handlebars. But I'm adding a script element to my page, and normally script elements contain JavaScript. But I'm not going to put JavaScript in here. Instead, I'm going to put HTML in here. And the HTML is going to be an A tag that has the list group item class on it, and in there he's going to have an H4 with the list group item heading, I believe. And, well, that's enough for now. In there, he's going to have list group item text. I think. Let me scroll up a bit. List group item text heading. It looks like we got the same structure. I did it outside the script element because my little snippets don't work here inside the script element. So I had to do it outside. I'm just going to paste it in. Notice the contents of the script element now is HTML. Normally, these things contain JavaScript, and if we were to save this and try to refresh, somebody's not happy. We have an error inside our browser, unexpected token less than, right here where our template started. Our browser thinks that there's supposed to be JavaScript inside this file, and so he's trying to parse it and evaluate it. We want to tell him that it's not JavaScript, so we're going to set it. I was just starting to talk about handlebars, then that's cool. We didn't get very far, or I didn't go very far without you. But the reason why we were mentioning handlebars was because it can pre-compile our templates for us. And by pre-compile, I mean on the server. So when you are using the handlebars template engine, they document how to do this, but I have installed the handlebars node library. So there it is right there. I have it installed already on my machine, and this works the exact same way on Windows. So I use this on Windows all the time as well. Don't be afraid that I'm on Mac and I'm doing stuff on the command line. I hope that's pretty normal for most developers. But I'm going to compile my templates using the handlebars compiler, which I just asked for the help for. So when you pre-compile your templates, and the reason you're doing this is to make them small, so that they're not the big HTML files. I don't know if they actually become smaller JavaScript files, but JavaScript can be minified. But more importantly, fast, because we are doing the work of parsing and turning the HTML or that string into JavaScript on the server before any of our clients gets it. And when you want to do something like this, you open your text editor, you take your template. We have one of them right here, an item template, and we throw a new item template.html file into the page or our project, and we save an HTML file. And the extension doesn't matter. The extension doesn't matter, so, but all that matters is that it exists in the file, and I don't want to compile index, I want to compile item template. And notice how we get some nasty looking JavaScript. Yeah, that's much bigger, so it's not smaller at all. But this can be minified, like you normally do with JavaScript. But I'm going to output this to a file, so let's have it go to item template.js. I have a new file in my folder that contains that nasty JavaScript. This is what your templates look like after they're compiled. But because it's a JavaScript file now, I can include it into my page. Now this is a handlebars feature. Like I mentioned, handlebars uses the same syntax with some extensions that Mustache uses, but I really like handlebars' support for pre-compilation and support for registering custom helpers, so I tend to use it more than Mustache now. But you would include handlebars into your page and your pre-compiled template. And now that we've done this, my script is, well, it's kind of sloppy because I'm using Mustache twice. Okay, well, we'll keep Mustache in here. So we'll use Mustache for rendering the notice right here. We've got 111 new items to read. And we'll use handlebars to render the pre-compiled template. So let's do that inside our script. Get template source and Mustache compile. Those things we will only do if handlebars.templates and handlebars.templates, and I have a dash in the name, so use the full file name. So if that is true, we're going to use handlebars. Otherwise, we're going to fall back on the old code that we had that was using Mustache. And the nice thing about handlebars is that I don't have to load the source, or when I precompile, I don't have to load the source, I don't have to parse it and generate the function. I just have the function, and it's accessible via this handlebars templates property. And I just invoke it with, well, I guess I'm not invoking it, I am saving it into a variable. So if we did have this template compiled and loaded, then we're going to use it. Otherwise, we're going to do it the Mustache way. You would not normally mix Mustache and handlebars in the same project. There's no reason to. If you have handlebars, you would not load Mustache. So I just want to make that clear. It's not like handlebars is an extension. It's an alternative. They're kind of competitors, different open source projects. Handlebars has some extra features on top of what Mustache provides. To make sure everything still works, and 5 seconds later, I want to see my notice, and there it is. When I click this, I expect the new update to appear, and that's using the pre-compiled template now, not the one that we have embedded inside the HTML. So sweet, it looks like it's working. And we've already got new stuff. So let me jump back to the slides so we can see what it was that we left off. They make it easy. So let's look at the very last slide where I had some interesting questions, which maybe are answered now. What syntax does the template engine support? The thing about Mustache is that the syntax is as bare bones as it can get. Mustache calls themselves logic list templates. You're not allowed to put code in there, and this is a pretty big limitation, but it's also what makes the Mustache style or syntax so popular and so ubiquitous. There's so many template engines that use the same syntax because you don't have to support compiling any specific and parsing and evaluating any specific kind of code. It's not even just JavaScript. Right? You don't put JavaScript in there. You can't put inside your templates operators or function calls. You have to always use simple property names. They can, though, I didn't show this, they can have dots in them. So description.food.bar. It's not, you're just lacking the ability to do, this kind of thing where you can invoke methods and operators and whatnot. So that makes it easy to port. What was the other interesting bits? Where is the template code located? You saw me do it in a couple of different ways, and that was embedded inside the HTML, inside a script element with some non-JavaScript type. It's also possible to do it inside your actual code. I started to do that, but I took it away. So you can do something like this and put code in here. But do everybody a favor, I guess, and do not do this. So I don't know. This just seems like kind of defeats the purpose and just makes this still just as difficult to edit. I know I shouldn't say that. It's easier to edit than doing it the raw jQuery way, but come on. You can also do what we just did with pre-compiling it, and we've got this file now that we can include. So we've got options, and you can do what's appropriate for your application. The really nice thing about having your content in separate files, your templates, is that it's almost like they're separate pages. And as far as your editor is concerned, these are normal HTML files, and so all your snippets and whatnot works just fine inside them. Syntax highlighting, etc. You can even open this and get a peek at what it may look like. Obviously, this example is not doing a whole lot for us, and that's often what your templates do look like without all the CSS and the data and whatnot, but at least it's theoretically possible. But then compiling them into JavaScript, you can now concatenate and then minify every single JavaScript file that you have that contains all your compiled templates into one, hopefully small file, and load that with one HTTP request and make your app seem much more responsive. So other interesting questions when looking at client-side templating is how do you render repeated content in the Mustache style? That is curly brace, pound, and then the property name, list. And you have your repeated content inside there. And sorry about my squigglies looking so terrible. But you think of these a little bit like HTML tags with the pound and the slash. Right? I did this with my if statement inside one of these. Yes, right here. Think of this as like a loop of 1 or 0 or 1 items in it. So Mustache treats if statements and loops kind of identically. And they just vary their behavior based on what the actual data looks like. In this case, DT was not a list. I don't know where DT went. Oh, he was a simple date. So he got repeated 0 times or 1 time. So how do you avoid duplicating code? Well, all of the, or I shouldn't say all, but at least Mustache and Handlebars support this concept of partials. And you can include one partial template into another via a syntax that looks like this. It always involves stashes, so stash dash, and then the greater than sign, and then here is your partial template name. And think of this as being like a server-side include, or if you do ASP.NET MVC, a little bit like at HTML.partial, and then you pass in the file name right there. So this in the Razor syntax would be equivalent to this in the Mustache syntax. Same concept, just done a little bit differently. How you get the template engine to register the partials or to be able to find them varies by the engine. Mustache and Handlebars have different APIs for doing that. So you have to figure out which one you're using or decide which one you're using and then read the docs. Other interesting questions, how does your JavaScript handle new and old content? And let me actually demo this because I think it's so important that web developers be familiar with this concept. And if you're not yet, let's take a peek at it. Back to my script. I'm going to add some client-side code. And for all of the list group items in my page, when they get clicked, I am going to call, use jQuery to toggle the class named active on and off. And this is a bootstrap class. So it should make, I think with my current theme, it should make these things blue when they click on them. Oh, it's not unselecting the old ones, of course. I didn't make it do that. But the main thing I want to point out here is that this behavior is now there, we now have this interactive behavior. And when I click the notice at the top of the screen and new items appear, they don't have that behavior anymore. And in fact, I'm clicking these links, and it's navigating to a new page, which is why we see this thing up here. Oh, it stopped doing it. It just did it once, but we saw this thing reset, which is a little bit annoying. So the problem here might seem obvious. At the time this code ran, there was only 3 list group items on the page. So only those 3 list group items got this functionality wired up to it. Later on, we injected some new items into the page. We did not then again render that content. We rendered the content, but we did not handle the events. So obviously, we just take this code and copy it down there. But we're not going to do that, because sometimes the obvious thing is not the best thing. Instead of handling click events on my list group items, I'm going to handle it on the list group itself. And I'm going to use this other version of handling events in jQuery, which supports dynamic content. So I kind of move things out around, but I'm now selecting the container, and he always exists. And what we're asking jQuery to do here for us is when we click on a list group item inside of this container, this list group element, we want to invoke this function. And jQuery ensures that this points to the list group item that just got clicked on and not the list group itself, which it would normally do. And with that super subtle change of wiring up that event handler, we'll see that our button still works, or a clicking still works, and it changes the style as we click around on them. Now when new items come in, click that, and our new items came in, they now are bubbling their events up to their parent container, and they work just like they did before. I don't have to dynamically add or remove events as new data comes in and leaves. And this is just normal DOM event bubbling, which jQuery tends to call event delegation, but it's done with the on method that has an extra string in the middle of the event name and the function. So if you haven't seen that before, check it out. It makes working with dynamic pages, no matter whether you're using jQuery, just raw jQuery, template engines like Mustache and Handlebars, or even things like Knockout. Although in Knockout you do raw event handling a lot less. But like I mentioned, I use all 3 of these things together. I often use Mustache templates to generate my Knockout bindings. Right, so it's almost like I got templates for my templates, and it's just a very useful tool that you can take advantage of. One more thing before we go, and because I dropped my connection, and I'm really sorry about that. I may not be getting your questions because nothing's appearing here, which is a bummer. But if you have questions, you can email me. But I want to point out one more thing. We're generating content now on the client with these templates and on the server. Remember that slide a few slides ago, this one right here? We initially generate content up here on the server, and if we want to get new stuff, we get data from the server and we generate the content down here. But now I've got to have my client-side templates and my server-side templates. And for most .NET developers, your server-side templates are Razor views these days if you're using MVC. I'm not seeing questions either. Okay, but at least I'm still online, so that makes me feel good that we got that. I got a message from Mary, so I hope you guys can all still hear me. And that's a bummer that we have 2 different syntaxes. The Mustache syntax on the client, and then the Razor syntax on the server. But back to this website, the Mustache, the main site for that documents the Mustache syntax and then has links to all these different implementations. The .NET version is called Mustache, and if my network wasn't being so slow right now, we'd see that it's just a GitHub project that implements the exact same syntax in .NET. And there's an MVC view engine that plugs into MVC3, and it works in 4 also, but allows you to share templates on the client and on the server. So it supports the exact same syntax, and so you can take advantage of that. if you want to. I really like Razor though, so I have a hard time using Mustache on the server just because I like the Razor syntax so much. And so I feel bad, but what am I going to do about writing the same templates twice sometimes? It's not all the times, but sometimes it happens. Like I mentioned when we started, my name is Jason Diamond. So let me go back to the very beginning. If you could remember my name, my email address is pretty easy to remember as well. Feel free to send me any follow-up questions. Sorry about disconnecting. The recording, hopefully with the black section in the middle, will be edited out, but it'll be available on our website, and you should be getting an email within a few days with details on how to download it. But if you have more questions, feel free to follow up with emails. Otherwise, I'll see you in class. Come see us sometime, and we'll talk about some neat client-side JavaScript stuff and single-page apps in HTML5. We have a Gorilla coming up in Boston in October. We also have, if you've been to any of our classes or webinars recently, Learning Line, our new application, which is normally faster than this, but I have a slow internet connection right now for some reason. But it lets you do online learning, instructor-led learning, but at your own pace. So check it out, and thanks. If I see questions up here, I'd be happy to answer any. Otherwise, maybe I'll see some of you on Thursday for the Bootstrap webinar, and we'll see how to make our pages look pretty good with very, very little effort. Thanks. And there's old stuff. Okay.